Hello, Andrew. Welcome. Many thanks for joining us. So just a few words of introduction. So Andrew Reed has been is a graduate of Georgetown University, has been at the Heights since 1998. In the year 2000, became the head of middle school, and he teaches science at middle school. Now, Andrew and his wife has 6 children, and he regularly gives talks to parents and different schools, and he's currently working on a very exciting project, which is parenting with optimism. So Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, because the Heights is very much a school that we look up to at the Cedars. So thank you very much for agreeing to talk about freedom. So I guess the first question is, what is freedom?
Well, thanks, Paulo. And I also want to say thank you for hosting. And we have a lot of admiration and a lot of affection for the Cedars as a brother school. And I'm very pleased to talk to you about, I think, what is actually a very similar theme that is a part of the spirit of our 2 schools and the approach that we take as boys' schools, who are training young men to become men who are fully devoted to others, fully devoted to their faith, and also training young men to become what they're capable of becoming, which is someone who's really trustworthy. And I think that's really the starting point for our conversation about freedom. So freedom is best understood as the ability to choose the good. It's not just a license to do whatever one pleases. That's, I think, would be a mistake. We're not just talking about political liberty here. We're talking about a fact about our nature as human beings. We were made free. We were made with a free will. And this promotes, I think, within our schools, this approach of freedom. It promotes a sense of cheerfulness too. And it allows us to ideally continually make good choices. Many schools, the goal is control. Many families, the goal of parenting becomes control. And I think that really misses this opportunity for formation and freedom. Students who make good choices and know that they made them are more likely to make more good choices. Students who are required constantly at every stage, at every turn, told exactly what they have to do, they're less likely to be on a roll with good choices. And so freedom can also be thought of as a state of being. We become more free as a result of good choices. So being familiar with the Cedars as a brother school, and also knowing that the same unique spirit is in our 2 schools, I think that it's good to remember that we're educating boys according to their nature. As parents, we have to raise our children according to their nature. And the fact is, they were made with a free will. I often refer to it as the fact of freedom. We know as parents, and it's probably the hardest thing about parenting, it's probably the hardest thing about running a school, is that we know what is good, and not every one of our students knows exactly what is good. So we have to find ways to encourage them, to show them what is good, but we have to let them make this choice to pursue the good. And I know that our students at the Cedars and at the Heights, I'm sure that they appreciate this approach. If you ask any of our students, what's unique about the school, you're going to hear something along the lines of, there's trust. And this is a really important approach, fundamental to the 2 schools, is that we are entrusting them with their own freedom. And when we do that, it actually gives them a sense of expectation. And that expectation is very powerful. It's probably more powerful than every single bit of instruction you can give a student at every turn. You're telling them what to do. As parents, we take that approach far too often. And maybe we talk about some of the different approaches to parenting, but if we're more optimistic with our approach of parenting, if we believe in our children, more often than not, they're not going to let us down. But it's a matter of trust, really. So I hope that answers your first question.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Andrew. I guess the question then becomes, how can we create a good environment to trust in the freedom of our children, in the freedom of our students? Because, in a sense, sometimes we want to have everything under control. So how can we enable a good environment for their freedom to flourish?
That's a great question. I can tell you that we probably have to remember as parents, and we have to encourage each other as parents, husbands and wives together when possible. You need to remind each other of this, that it is actually very practical to not tell your son what to do at every minute of every day. We have this tendency as parents, we're probably the most anxious generation of parents in the history of the world, perhaps. If you look at us as a generation from a societal standpoint, our parents were not as involved, and they didn't necessarily give us quite as much as instruction when they weren't as worried. And I'm quite certain if you go back 2 generations or 3 generations, there was probably even more trust being given societally. And the society that American society, the society in the UK, culturally, nobody wants to really trust middle school boys, high school boys, lower school boys. They don't want to trust them. And, we should be running schools and we should be running homes that offer more trust. I believe that when trust is in the room, whatever room that is, if it's the family room, if it's the school room, the locker room, the office, government rooms or military rooms, throughout all levels of society and all different ranges, when trust is in the room, good things happen. And when trust is not in the room, good things don't happen. So as a school, we need this sense of trust. But as parents in our homes, if we offer this sense of trust, it actually gives a sense of expectation. And expectation is probably the most powerful of all instruction, giving a sense of, we know you're good. We believe in you. There's a sense there that we're going to entrust you with this. And it's hard as parents because often we don't know for sure what our sons really are going to do with that freedom. But if we don't trust them, then the message is the opposite. If we don't entrust them with more incrementally, and I think gradually, and I'm not saying that we should give them free license on everything, but I think I'm really trying to emphasize this sense of expectation. Expectations are more powerful than constant guidance. And I believe that when a student or your son, it's a sense of my father, my mother, my teacher is entrusting me with something, he won't want to let you down.
That's brilliant. You've talked about anxiety, which I think it's very topical nowadays. And it's something that we see in today's society among young people. But I think we still, as parents, as educators, we're very much attached to our students, to our children, of course. And there is a danger of becoming a bit of a helicopter parent. So do you have any practical tips to perhaps prevent us from falling into that trap?
Sure, that's a great question too. And the answer is, in my opinion, and this is just from somebody with experience as a dad and talking to lots of families, we do have this tendency to overmanage. I think that when we overmanage, we're actually going to keep our son's will immature. So when we have a son who we think is perhaps in need of lots of guidance, we do have to allow him to grow up. And the approach that we take as schools and as families has to be the same approach. Is this sense of it's going to work out. That's the best encouragement. It has to be our fundamental orientation towards our kids, towards the boys in our classrooms, towards our own children. If they get this sense of it's going to work out, versus the opposite sense is I'm very nervous about you. I don't know if this is going to be a disaster. If we take that approach, they're taking all their cues from us. And it's not just what we say, it's our fundamental belief. Like, ask yourself this question, fathers and mothers out there. Do you believe in your son? And if you do, he knows it. And if you don't, he knows it. And so, should you believe in him? The answer is yes. I mean, why? He was made good, right? We know he was made good. You remember bouncing him on your knee, right? When he was little. He was made good. And yes, he's going to occasionally make some tougher choices. And at times he's going to head in the wrong direction. We have to be okay with that. And we can't have this confidence in our sons that is like a house of cards, that it all falls as soon as something goes wrong. I have news for you. Every single boy is going to make mistakes out there. But that doesn't mean that we have to drop our confidence level in our children. So I want us to think about freedom, which is the fact of their nature that we can't change. That's the way they were given to us, right? And we should be grateful, because that freedom hopefully is going to allow them to be, to be able to love and to be generous, right? All the good things in life are going to come from his good choices. So we have to see ourselves as parents as training our students, training our sons. But freedom equals trust, plus we have to admit it, some risk. There's going to be some risk here. And as parents, I'm just going to suggest that you evaluate risk and realize that you need to trust your son in the areas where the risk is not too great. When he's younger, you keep him in the shallow end of the pool, right? You don't want him swimming to the deep end. But we have to be aware that there are deep ends out there. And so I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination, give your son license to do anything he wants. For instance, I tell parents all the time, if you want to overmanage something, overmanage your son's screen time, overmanage your son's internet use, his TV use, all these things that are going to give him inputs as to what reality is, what is true. You want to be setting him up to get the right inputs into his moral imagination, the things that he thinks about. So as parents, we want to be providing them with good books, with good mentors like yourself, Pablo, with good people who are involved in their lives. And that's why as schools, I think we're pretty successful at what we're trying to do, because we're partnering with families who want to take this same approach of entrusting something to their sons. At the same time, yes, we do have to evaluate risk. So you would give more freedom to someone, say, who's a 12th grader headed off to college. You're training them gradually for coming into grips with his own freedom. That would be different, a 12th grader heading off to college, than, say, your youngest student in the school. So, so freedom equals trust plus risk. And we have to be okay with risk, because risk is a part of life and it's part of parenting. I mean, having children, it's not easy. This is the hardest thing, is that they have this other will, this other free will. But if we neglect, if we pretend like it doesn't exist for as long as possible, and we're just going to control everything, then we're going to leave their will immature, and they're not going to be seeking the good on their own. So that's really the goal. We want them to be seeking the good and finding the good on their own.
Brilliant. Now, Andrew, you've been talking about obviously risk, but also expectations, which I thought was a very interesting idea. How about when we see our children taking bad decisions, or indeed beginning to take bad decisions, but at the same time we have to enable them to take those bad decisions? What can we do then? Because it can be very painful in a sense that if you see that they're taking the wrong path.
I think when we guide our children, it has a lot to do with the way we guide them. First and foremost, keep your children close. Keep your sons close. Know what's going on in their lives. I'm not saying push them away. Know what's going on in their lives. Be a part of their life. Have daily conversations. For instance, when do you speak with your son? What are the routines? So keep them close. But at the same time, don't use that closeness as an opportunity to overly regulate them on everything. When they make a bad choice, don't overreact. Help them see the bad choice that they've made. Help them understand why it's bad. Have them actually hear you and not just hear the emotion of how frustrated you are as a parent. But I do think we have to realize that when they make bad choices, and they will, right? This is part of parenting. That this is, we don't expect perfection. We have to be reasonable as parents, right? Anybody out there not made a mistake as a parent, right? Anybody out there not made a mistake as a teenager or as a middle schooler? So lots of love, lots of encouragement. Keep your sons close. Listen to them. Give them guidance. Give them guidance, but do it in a manner that is not constantly overlording everything. Let me give you an example. You could say your son, here in the U.S. it's baseball, but I know in Great Britain is cricket. Okay. So, you know, say they have a practice. Okay. Okay. So say they have a, we have completely different ideas about football too, but say they have a practice. The practice is on Wednesday night and they have a big test on Thursday. And here you are as a parent, it's Tuesday night, and you want to probably say, you know, you have to study because you have practice tomorrow. So sit down right now and get your work done because you have to be ready for your test. That's going to be the day after your practice and you won't have enough time tomorrow night to study. You want to say that as a parent, but it's better to prompt your son. Ask a question, something along the lines of, and it's the way in which we do this that actually matters. You might say something along the lines of, you know, you have a practice tomorrow night and the day after you have a test. So what do you think would be a good idea to do tonight? And then, so you're prompting with a question. You probably already know the answer, right? But that extra step there of asking the question as opposed to just telling him what to do, that extra step allows his will to act. And his will, his motive force, his own commitment has to be respected. So asking that question, the tone in which we parent, it's actually really matters. So if you can prompt with questions, the more you can take that approach, the better. That's hard, I know. But if we can do that as parents, it builds the expectation that they're going to make a good choice.
Andrew, listening to you, I mean, it just sounds beautiful, the fact that it's almost counterintuitive, the fact that sometimes we think of freedom from the point of view of discipline and education and so on. But it almost sounds as though, on the one hand, you have to have discipline, you have to have those boundaries, but on the other hand, you really need the key ingredient, which is affection, which is almost friendship with your son and or daughter, right? I mean, would you say that's the case, the idea of building trust through friendship?
Well, I'd say that the word friendship implies equality. Yes. And I think that other than, I mean, that's where you want your son and daughter to be when they grow up. And they're I mean, I think of my mom and dad as two people who are the closest. You know, I hope that everyone else that there can say that they're close with their parents as friends, as a parent yourself. If you can't, though, I think that you look back on your life and you say, well, if there was a closeness that was there, it would have helped a lot. So we need to have this closeness, this affection. There has to be an overwhelming sense of love. As parents, I know that as parents of the Cedars, you're a very devoted bunch as parents of the Cedars. They're only with you for a short time. I think that as parents, they're only with you for this relatively short window in their lives. I mean, they'll grow up and you look back, they've grown up very fast. So you have this opportunity, this window of time where you can actually train your sons in a loving, formative way to come to grips with their own freedom. And this should be a gradual process, but it's something that will definitely increase the sense of cheerfulness in the home. It'll increase the sense of expectation that they're going to make good choices, which means that they're more likely going to make good choices. And finally, it helps them know that you believe in them, that you're optimistic. And I think that's probably the most important message our kids get from us when it comes to these exchanges of how do we get them to do what we want them to do and make good choices. The answer is that we believe that they will. And if we believe that they will, they're far more likely. And I'm not just saying, I'm not just talking about telling your son. I'm talking about your son, your daughter, they need to know that you believe in them, that you believe that they're going to make good choices. That'll get you so much further than all the instruction in the world. And so ask yourself, is that a fundamental part of the way you teach? The fundamental part of the way you raise your children? It has to be a fundamental part of the way we form these young men, because it is a fact of their nature. They have this free will, and we have to help them with that so that they can make good choices.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. Just before we finish, you've talked about developing our freedom as a gradual process, but would you say whether there's an age which is crucial in developing that freedom, that sense of freedom?
So I'm sorry, Paolo, I didn't hear that last one. It didn't come out clear. So
no problem. So you talked about the gradual development of freedom, but would you say whether there's a sort of a key age in developing that sense of freedom? I mean, is it adolescence? Is it pre-adolescence?
I think each one of our sons is going to move through this process of freedom and coming to grips with making good choices on his own. He's going to come into this process gradually at different phases. So just like some students tend to be more mature than others, and some are less mature than others, we have to reach this moment as parents where we realize we need to do this gradually. So if you haven't fully embraced this message of your own son's free will is going to be there at some point, you have to get moving on that as parents. We have to gradually develop that as parents. So that level of encouragement really matters.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And just finally, Andrew, I mean, I will be here talking with you for hours, but I'm aware that you've got lessons to go to. Have you got any final words of encouragement when thinking about freedom, when thinking of all the difficulties that we have as parents, as educators? Do you have any final words of encouragement or any golden nuggets?
I think that in the end, as parents, what really matters is the love that's in our homes, you know, and the amount of, sometimes we're in this, there's a competition there between the sense of affection and the love and the constant anxiety need to make sure that everything's perfect. That's a temptation as parents. In the meantime, your son's growing up right underneath your roof, faster than ever, faster than we would all choose. He's growing up and he's figuring out the world. And in the meantime, what he needs more than all the guidance in the world is trust and a sense of love and affection. These aspects of our parenting, that's what your son's going to remember, not whether or not you reminded him about every single aspect of his life. So you know what, in the end, we also have to realize that we don't want to miss the forest for the trees, right? And so the big picture is, does our son know that we have confidence in him? We're much more likely to have everything work out if he knows that. So, thank you, Pablo.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Well, I guess we can leave it there. But as I said, thank you so much for coming on the call. And we hope to have you at the Cedars one day in person. I mean, hopefully in a not too distant future. So thank you so much, Andrew.
My pleasure. I'll look forward to that. At some point, I'd love to visit the Cedars. So
thank you.
Take care. Thank you.